inviting me to speak at today's symposium. My name is Georgina Perry and I'm the Service Manager of the Clinical Case Management and Outreach Service for Sex Workers called Open Doors, an NHS service based in East London. And before I continue, I'd like to make a clear and unambiguous point. Working for the NHS brings with it a strict imperative, not to take actions that harm people. In fact, we try our very hardest to do least harm, to improve the health and well-being of the people we serve, and to understand that where health-related harm exists, we have a public duty to identify it and to seek ways to manage, minimise and to ultimately remove harm. During the 13 years I've been running Open Doors, every initiative I've developed has been with this imperative in mind. In most health-related services, 13 years is a long time in which to refine an approach and make significant headway in understanding how to improve the health and life chances for a unique cohort. Take access to sexual health treatment services, for example. It would be true to say that for most people in our society, a trip to the GU clinic in 2015, whilst not necessarily pleasant, is an activity that they would be fairly confident to undertake. It would not be a trip laden with the fear of what might happen if they encounter professionals who wear a badge, albeit medics, but associated with authority, thereby associated with other professionals who wear a uniform, those being the very professionals who have licence to arrest them. Sounds overdramatic? Not at all. It's one of the first questions my team are asked when we encounter sex workers on outreach who've never used our services before. How do I know if I can trust you? In my home country, the hospitals and the police are linked. When the flat I worked here in East London was raided, the police took my ID, they told me if I worked again as a prostitute, I would be arrested and deported. I can't come to your hospital because I will have to give my name and details. Don't let anyone tell you that being a criminal doesn't drive you underground. It's what Open Doors sees day in, day out. Sex workers who need help and support, fearful of using services, coming late during illness or not at all to seek treatment for health problems that are simple to treat, and that anyone else would have been banging down the doors of their local clinic to get sorted on day one. And really, it's time to stop this nonsense. It's not like we can't do things differently, and here's a good example of how. Between 2009 and 10, in the lead up to the London Olympics, and during a time of considerable police attention towards sex workers in East London, nurses in one of the Open Doors clinics became aware of a larger number than usual of sex workers attending our clinic who've been victims of sexual violence. I could hypothesise a correlation. It's a bit of a digression, I know, but still on point. More police raids throughout London, more sex workers becoming transitory and working in less safe environments because the safer flats have been closed down, more rapists and violent perpetrators saying, and I quote, and often do because it makes me so angry that people need to hear this, I can do this to you and you won't be able to report this because what you do is illegal and you are breaking the law. When we asked the women who were coming to our clinic whether they knew that there were specialist sexual assault centres in London and whether they'd reported these attacks against them to the police, we were told, we don't know where to go for help if we've been raped and we can't go to the police because they'll arrest us. And as much as it pains me to say this, in so many cases they were right. To this day we work with women from certain London boroughs who, when trying to report violent sexual assaults against them, have their first dealing with some unreconstituted police officer somewhere who says, go home love, it goes with the territory, doesn't it? And really, why would someone who's been arrested 2 days before by the police think that it might be worth going back to the same institution that had just treated her like a criminal to report a heinous crime which has taken place against her? So after meetings back in 2009 with senior colleagues from the Metropolitan Sapphire Unit, our local rape and sexual assault centre, it was confirmed both that reports of sexual violence towards sex workers to the police were unimaginably low. 12 reports made by sex workers in the whole of 2009 across East London, and even fewer sex workers accessing specialist forensic and medical services. And so a joint initiative was developed. Open Doors allocated a specially trained independent sexual violence advisor to work with all and any sex worker who'd been a victim of sexual violence whilst either living or working in East London. At the same time, an ongoing programme of training for Sapphire officers was undertaken, a programme that sought to challenge, address the core and understanding of the stigma, discrimination and additional challenges faced by sex workers within the criminal justice system. This training addressed sex workers' biggest fears of coming into contact with the police and also developed understanding and strategies around supporting sex workers to stay engaged with the criminal justice process. Once satisfied that sex workers' fear of arrest could be responded to and allayed, a relentless round of publicity began, with the Open Doors team promoting the years of service, the Sapphire Unit and the sexual assault centres, in the hope of building trust and confidence in reporting. To be honest, we held our breath as the first reports started to come in and increase over time. Could our colleagues in the Met Sapphire manage to maintain trust and confidence with women who had previously been criminalised by other areas of the Met? Well, 5 years on, and I'm pleased to say that the partnership is still a good one, and that when the Sapphire unit is involved, the outcomes for our women in East London are mostly very positive. Reporting of sexual violence has increased by sex workers in East London year on year. On average now, we support 35 sex workers annually to report instances of sexual violence, and the conviction rate now in the past 5 years stands at 21 perpetrators who've been given prison sentences of between 2 and 22 years. It's a bittersweet success given the subject matter, but proof that where there is an appetite to do something different in terms of policing, to focus on the crimes perpetrated against sex workers rather than treating sex workers as criminals, justice and public protection can be the same for sex workers as for anyone else. But wait, let me go back and repeat that. Where there is an appetite to do something different, to focus on the crimes against sex workers rather than treating sex workers as criminals, justice and public protection can be the same for sex workers as anyone else. Does that sound right to you? Because the more I say it, pleased though I am that sex workers are receiving better and a more just response, the more I know that this is entirely wrong. A basic human and civil right, such as that of having a violent and degrading crime against you investigated in a thorough manner, should not have to be the exception rather than the rule. Special initiatives are just that, special initiatives. There is no guarantee that when our colleagues in the Sapphire unit eventually change, these more progressive approaches won't change with them. Because you have to be on it all the time to make sure that these standards continue, insisting that awareness, knowledge and accountability remains high, because sadly these things don't always embed. Why should they? It's an initiative, it's not the law. Police officers rotate through the method of rapid pace. First as frontline beat bobbies, where often they are first exposed to people in the sex industry and where their first perspectives are formed. Then they become more specialist, moving between sections such as vice, domestic violence, trafficking, where their views and perspectives can become even more defined. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse when it comes to the sex work and rights agenda. If sex work was decriminalised, then all the ambiguity would be removed. Police wouldn't have to question whether they can investigate the crime before the sex work. Sex workers wouldn't have to worry whether or not reporting a rape in a brothel would implicate them and their colleagues in an investigation about the way they are earning a living. Local police initiatives can be great, but they're ad hoc, dependent on the common sense of individuals within the police force, and in this day and age, it's just not good enough. We need the law to change, we need to decriminalise sex work, because until that happens, I cannot ensure that the people that I serve will have access to the type of support and services that anyone else in our society would take as a basic human right, and that has to change. Thank you.